Elementary Book Club. We are continuing talking about the LUX series today. This time, book 2, Onyx. Last time we talked about Obsidian, and now we're continuing with the book Onyx. And because I love these books so much, I actually have an Onyx necklace. I have an Obsidian one too, couldn't find it, which is why it's not in that other video. And then I have an Opal necklace, which is book 3. And the different Obsidian, Onyx, and Opal are very important to the stories. Actually, what's funny is if I was actually in this world, I wouldn't be wearing Onyx. I wouldn't want to be wearing Onyx if I was connected to anyone in the story. But after reading these books, I was so into the lore and everything that went along with it that I bought a set of necklaces that were Obsidian, Onyx, and Opal, and I wore them all the time just because 1, they're pretty, and 2, because I just liked having something that was from the books. Okay, but let's talk about Onyx. So I guess we kind of talk a little bit about what happened in Obsidian first. So in Obsidian, you have Katie. She's human. She's just moved to this small little town, and she moves in next door to aliens. Twins, Dee and Damon. Dee immediately wants to be Katie's friend, and Damon is set against it. Obviously because he doesn't want her to know that they are aliens. But of course, in style with this kind of writing, of course she's gonna find out they're aliens. And of course there's gonna be this crazy love-hate thing that goes on between Damon and Katie for quite some time. It continues into book 2. In book 1, there's not really too much romance between the two of them. There's just a lot of back and forth, and there's heat, and there is passion, and you can tell oh, it's coming. They're denying it, but it's coming. Well, Damon actually ends the book pretty much saying, I care about you. I care about you more than I should, and I want more. And Katie's like, no, you don't. Because at the end of book 1, there's this really big attack from the Aram. The Aram are the dark, evil aliens. And the Dee and Damon and others in this town are called the LUX, the Luxin. They are beings of light. They are these super crazy, overly powerful light beings. They can travel the speed of light, they can move light, bend light, and do lots of other crazy things because of who they are. And then the Aram are the counterparts. They are darkness, shadow, and they want to destroy the light. Obviously, you got your dark and your light. Pretty clear and cut. In book 2, we see more of the fact that there is the dark aliens, the Aram, and we see the light, but we're also learning about, of course there's gotta be government involvement. Aliens, of course, there's gonna be government things around, and that becomes a lot more prominent in book 2. But, let me take a step back. At the end of book 1, there's an arm attack, and Katie is nearly killed. But Damon is doesn't want to lose her, cares about her. This is where he's really hits that moment. He goes, no, I care about you more than I should, but I don't want you to, I care about you more than I should. I'm not going to let you die. So he pretty much brings her back from death itself. And this does something to Katie. There's a connection now. They're not really sure what this connection means or what it's going to do, but now there's a connection. And Katie's all oh, this is why you're romantically interested in me, because of this connection. Because before this, you were a jerk. And you know what? I want to talk about that for a minute, because I actually read some people's opinions of Damon and Katie in the first book, and even going into the second. And I think it's important to talk about the fact that a lot of people are oh, Damon is an abusive jerk. He is abusive. And I understand where people are coming from. And I agree and disagree. No, I don't disagree that he's abusive, but it's not exactly an abusive relationship. And here's why. Because Katie stops it. Katie calls him on it, and there's a genuine change. It would be truly abusive if he was truly a jerk, and he didn't recognize it, and he continued over and over again. But I see where people come across, they're oh, he's an abusive jerk. Why does she put up with it? And that's the thing, she doesn't. That is what I love about Katie. She does not put up with it. I also love that she loves books, because everyone should love books. Books are wonderful. But she doesn't put up with Damon's crap. And when Damon starts to pursue her romantically, she's you don't get to do this. You don't get to just decide one day that you like me, and I just have to forget all the jerkish things you did. Because he was terrible to her. He embarrassed her. He humiliated her. The way he talked to her and acted towards her. He was a jerk. And yes, it's abusive what he did. And I 100% agree. But the only reason it is not an abusive relationship is because she said, I'm not taking that from you. If you can show me that is not the true you, then we can talk about this, maybe. But you don't get to just pretend that none of that ever happened just because you were trying to protect your big alien secret. And I'm like, yes, girl! Like, now if she had just laid down and took it and be like, oh, I get it, like, it was your secret, you did it to protect... No, she's like, I don't care that you were protecting them, I don't care that you were trying to keep people safe. You don't treat people like that, you don't treat me like that, and I'm not gonna be interested in you when you treat me like that. Because he was horrible to her. And I agree with everyone that talks about that, because it's, like, people should not, I'm trying to think, there's so many people that were like, oh, Damon Black is this wonderful, amazing character, and yeah, he kind of is, but we shouldn't be so obsessed with a character that is actually like a really big abusive jerk. Now, he changes, and that is the reason I can say that, oh, he is pretty. Like, he's he's attractive, he's strong, he's loyal, he's protective, and he redeems himself eventually. But book 1, he is nothing but a big abusive jerk, and I agree with everyone who writes that. Everyone who reviewed the book that way, I agree. The only reason I give him, I don't dismiss it, but he does redeem himself. And again, this is fiction. Like, it's not real. It didn't actually happen. Like, I think if I read about something that was real about this, I would be uncomfortable. I wouldn't like it. But it's fake. And at least, like, the girl stands up for herself. She's like, you don't get to treat people like this. It's not just, like, and it's not even about Katie herself. She's like, you treat everybody like this. You treat your family like this. You treat your friends like this. She's like, I don't want to deal with anyone that's going to be this horrible all the time. Now, of course, she's still like, oh yeah, he's super hot. And he does all of these other things that make him really amazing. Yes, he does. But that doesn't excuse the fact that he does some really, really terrible things in the beginning. So, and that's something that Katie and Damon work on a lot in book 2, because he's trying to show her he wants to change. He wants to be a better person. He doesn't want to be... Now, he is still a little full of him. Oh, he's very full of himself. I'm not going to tell you a little. He is so full of himself. But he's also loyal and protective to a fault. And now that Katie is in that circle, he doesn't treat her like that anymore. And that's not to say that it's an excuse for why he treated her like that. He shouldn't have done that. But it's to say, like, I see more where he, like, if he had just done it because he was just being a jerk, that's one thing. But he did it out of a sense of loyalty and protection to his sister and to the other Lux. Again, it was terrible. But it's more understandable in this particular case. And it's also more understandable because he changes. And he makes an effort to say, you were right, I was wrong. I can't do this anymore. And he does change. And that is the big difference. Which is why I admire Damon's character, because he goes through a lot of changes. You see that he's not just this tough jerk. Like, he's got feelings and emotions, and you see those come out. Like, they come out at the end of book 1, and they come out a lot more in book 2. There's a lot that happens in book 2. I don't like spoiling things early. I'll probably talk more about the big things that happen in book 2 in the next video, so it's not a spoiler, because at that point you should have read book 2 anyway. But there's a lot that goes on. Like, it's where we start to learn, like, the Aram aren't the only problem. There's a government agency, the DOD, and we have a new character into the scene. We have Blake, who Damon makes every effort to never say his name correctly. Again, it's one of those things where he is a bit of a jerk towards Blake, but it's because, one, he's protective, but also because, let's be honest, he's probably a little jealous. Because we learn that Katie has developed powers. Oh yeah, she got some powers of her own. And it's because of the healing in book 1. I guess the way they put it is he mutated her. So now she's this thing called hybrid. And I don't think it's spoiling too much to say that. Like, she's a hybrid. Like, so now she's got some abilities that are like the Lux, but she's still human. So she's this weird in-between. And that's a very interesting thing to the government. And there's a lot that goes on with that. I don't want to spoil it. It's a really good continuation of the series. One thing that happens with some series is there's like a book, somewhere between book 2 and 4, there's a book that just feels really dull and unnecessary, and it wasn't this one. I don't think it happens in this series. Like, I feel like I've been really lucky finding series that don't have that dull, like, you need it for the story, sure, but it's a connector. But that doesn't happen. So, book 2, just as good as book 1. I think I gave it 4 or 5 stars, because I recommend it. And I think I gave book 1 4 stars because I understood where people were coming from, like, Damon's a jerk. And, like, there's not much redeemable about him in book 1. Book 2, he does start to redeem himself. He still does some stuff that makes him a jerk and egotistical and makes you want to punch him in the face. But it's not in the same way that he was in book 1. Like, anyone that was obsessed over Damon Black after book 1, I don't understand. book 2, book 3 going forward, he becomes such a more admirable character. And that is pretty much it. Next time, well, I guess the next video that'll be up is Nevermore. The Nevermore trilogy is starting. I'll be talking about book 1 in just a few days. It's a good series. It's a weird series, but it's a good series so far. And then this will be continuing a week from now, talking about book 3, Opal, which means I'm really going to be talking a lot about this book, is what I've learned. But I'm doing a series because I don't want to spoil what happens in the book. I want to talk about how there are, like, developments and changes and little things, but I don't want to overspoil, like, the end of the story because some people haven't read these yet. And I don't like spoiling things. So next week, I will be talking about Opal and talking more about, like, the big plot twist at the end of Onyx, because the ending of Onyx is quite intense. It just carries into the beginning of book 3. It's a lot. There was some intense stuff at the end of this book. Like, that's another thing I'll say about this book. Like, the dialogue is really good. The sarcastic banter, amazing. The pacing is super strong. And it's just, you feel so much emotions for these characters. Like, you feel a connection to these characters. Like, I love these characters, all of them. Like, they are such well-written characters. It's such a well-created world. I love everything that Jennifer L. Armentrout does with her books. She is such a phenomenal writer. I will never stop recommending her books. This series especially was one of the first ones I ever read. I was obsessed with it. Another series by her that is really good is the Covenant series. It's the first one I ever read by her. It's also amazing. I will hopefully eventually randomly draw it from my wonderful little basket, but I haven't yet. But when I do, I will also be doing that entire series because it's another really good series. But for now, that is the end of another Lux video. I hope you'll join us next time for either Nevermore, which is starting in just a few days, or next week when we go into book 3, Opal. See you next time. Bye!